Is it all right if I take a moment to be vulnerable and to be honest, and you're not going to judge me and hurt me too bad later on when we bring this back up? Joe brought up the fact that this was 15 years ago. I came from a really dysfunctional family. And so coming into the Bible college was a total life change for me. So I left a very dysfunctional, me going to church. I was the spiritual leader in my home at the age of 14. I was the one that made my parents take me to church. And finally it got to the point, once I turned like 14, 15, I was no longer given a ride to church. If you want to go to church, you've got a bike. And so I grew up with that. And so I started probably around 14 being curious with church. At 16, I decided I was going to start taking it serious. And it wasn't until about a month before the semester started that I decided I was coming to Bible college. So recognize and realize that this was a huge step for me and challenging me. And so when I came to Bible college, I got so overwhelmed with God. Now that seems crazy, and we can kind of like poke at that and say, how could you ever have too much God? But I got to the point where it's like I wasn't able to do personal devotions because I felt I covered that by doing my homework. And so it's like my Bible time, my personal time with God was an obligation. And it wasn't a desire, it wasn't a want. And so I got myself, and you're so filled with church because you're at Bible college and you're digging into the truth and you're doing that and you have passion for it. But then sometimes on Sunday morning you feel like, man, I've been filled with church all week. It's not that big of a deal if I miss Sunday morning. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt that way, but especially when I first got started, that's what it's like. And so that's me being brutally honest. Hopefully that maybe you don't experience that, but if you do, you don't feel like you're alone. But I've come to realize there's two, maybe three reasons we do things. Why do you obey God? Think about it. Answer me. Why do we obey God? And I think there's two. You could make an argument for three reasons we obey God. At least all drives back to that root. What do you think?
Love.
Pardon?
Because of love.
Love. I would say that would be the first thing. Now this doesn't have to be the reason that we're supposed to. Why do we do it? Why do Christians in general? Not necessarily the good reasons, but why do we obey God? Fear. And now that ties into obligation. Because whenever there's an obligation, when you don't meet your obligation, you're fearing the consequence of not doing what you're supposed to do. And so a lot of reasons will funnel into that, but there's one more. No, salvation, I think what you're tying that, well, yeah, maybe.
Get something out of it.
Reward. And I think reward and punishment root together as selfishness. We do it for our benefit, either for our benefit for not getting punished, or our benefit for getting a reward. And see, our motivation for doing things will determine our attitude in doing it. It'll determine whether or not we get burned out. Whenever you do something out of an obligation, out of fear, out of any other reason other than love, you're going to get burned out. And so I want you to think about that a little bit. But I want you to turn with me to John chapter 4. And in John chapter 4, we get the story of the woman that Jesus meets. And he starts talking about a living water. And a lot of attention goes to the living water, but I think a lot of times we bypass a different type of food that he talks about right afterwards. Right after he gets done talking to the woman there, in John chapter 4, verse 27, this is right after he has this meeting with this woman, the Samaritan woman who, by the way, you'll notice that the disciples are not too thrilled that he's hanging out with them. But in verse 27, just then the disciples returned and were surprised that he's talking with this Samaritan woman. One, there's really not a lot, there's the gender issues, but then on top of that, there's the racial issues. He's talking with somebody that they're not supposed to talk with. They're not supposed to associate with. So there's taboo written all over this. And so they're surprised, but they kind of ignore it. It says, but no one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking with her? They have bypassed her. She's not important. She's not valuable. But, going on in verse 28, then leaving her water jar, this switches to her. She leaves her water jar. She goes back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? Why did she leave? Did she do it out of obligation? Did she do it out of fear? Or was this something new that she found and she's passionate and she loved it? She left with a passion and desire, but going on, he goes on in verse 30, they came out of town and made their way toward him. And meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. There's some parts of Scripture that are like this little verse that are so easy to just jump to the next one. And sometimes there's so much more to these little verses than we often give them credit. But here, how many of you guys have just been so into something that you've forgotten to eat?
Amen.
You're just so into something and you're so committed and you're so... I usually don't say amen to not eating. I usually say amen to eating. But yeah, I mean, you just get so involved and so in the middle of it, and then you got somebody that cares about you that's on the outside that's saying, hey, Jesus, here's a Snickers bar. Come on. Come on. You need to take care of yourself. And you realize that in a lot of the disciples, a lot of when they're dealing with Jesus, they're in the mentality of Jesus, we've got to take care of me. We've got to take care of us. And the whole time Jesus is saying, it's not about us. It's about them. These people, this woman here that you just completely ignored, didn't care about, didn't love. It's about her, and you don't even see that. It's not about me. But then he goes on, and this is what I love. But he said to them, because we spent a lot of time talking about that living water in the previous part, right? We've heard about the water that Jesus offers to the woman at the well. What about this special food? He says, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. He's teaching the same thing, but to a different group. These are the ones that are supposed to get it. They're supposed to know. They're supposed to understand, but the whole time, they don't get it. I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? The same question is like, how can you get water without a bucket? Did somebody come in here and sneak him something to eat? I mean, who brought him, a fish sandwich? I mean, who brought him something to eat? Because it certainly, we didn't see it happen. When did he get something to eat? And then this here, my food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Where is Jesus' motivation? I don't need it to be about me when I'm doing work for him. And see, in today's society, we've really bought into a consumer mentality. I remember really young going out to eat. How many of you guys have ever ordered like a hamburger and don't like it the way that it comes? We used to, we didn't get to eat out a lot, but occasionally we get to go to McDonald's. We were allowed to order pretty much the cheapest thing on the menu, so we could get the cheeseburger. But it always came with onions.
Yes.
I hate those processed, dehydrated, crunchy, nasty onions.
Amen.
Amen.
And so I would always say, Mom, make sure you don't order onions on my burger. I just and then she'd say, well, you can just scrape it off.
It's not the same.
It is not the same. Because there's always one that slips through, and that flavor's there. And so, Mom, make sure, and she would always say, but they make all these burgers ahead of time. You making a special order slows the process down. So she didn't like the fact that we'd have to spend an extra 30 seconds so that I could eat what I wanted. And then I'd always get the story. When she was a kid, you weren't allowed to make substitutions on your food. And so I looked it up, and it's not completely sound, but it was 1973 that Burger King came out with the motto, have it your way. Have it your way. I thought this was cute. They came with it and said, hold the pickle, hold the lettuce, special orders don't upset us. The switch turned away from, this is what we have, take it or leave it. If you don't like pickles, if you don't like lettuce, if you don't like onions, scrape it off, peel it off, deal with it. And then all of a sudden, everybody else had to do the same thing. Because they changed their motto. It's not about us now. It's about you. It's about the consumer. It's about that. And so what happens is, I saw this, there's a comedian that was talking about what businesses promote. And so this is a long list, and so I actually scratched out some of them. But he says, these are things that businesses promote. He says, quality, value, style, service, selection, convenience, savings, performance, experience, low rates, friendly service, name brands, easy terms, affordable prices, money-back guarantee, free installation, free admission, free appraisal, free alterations, free delivery, free estimates, free home trial, free parking, no cash, no problem, no kidding, no fuss, no muss, no risk, no obligation, no red tape, no down payment, no entry fee, no hidden charges, no purchase necessary, no one will call on you, no payments or interest until September. Don't forget to pick up your free gift, a classic deluxe, custom designer, luxury prestige, high quality, premium, one-of-a-kind pencil holder. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary, our way of saying thank you, you are important, you are valued. It's all about the consumer. And see, that's awesome. Especially when I go to get a burger. Because I can have it my way. But the problem is that has seeped in to the church. That has seeped into the church where people want church. How? Their way. And that's where we get the messages of the people that do the what? That's tickling in the ear. You guys get that? That's my bad. But, and so we get a message that has to be alternated. But how many of you guys have ever heard someone, I'm going church shopping? I'm just feeling around to find the church that best meets my needs. When did the church ever be set up for the church, the individuals of the church? It was never about them, at least not in Jesus' eyes. The church was never meant to be the self-contained itty-bitty building that maintained itself and did nothing with anybody else. See, Jesus the whole time was focused on other people. And so we look here, he's with the woman at the well, and he's talking with his disciples, and they're so caught up on his nourishment. This isn't right before we eat saying you shouldn't eat. This is saying that we have a point and a purpose, and it goes into what God has established for us, and his plan for us to follow through. And as long as we're doing that, we get the living water and the spiritual food. But see, the church, we're not meant to be consumers. We're meant to be contributors.
Amen.
So when you go into a church, you're not supposed to say, well, what does the church offer for me? But instead, what can you bring to the church? And if you're not doing anything at church, your church is incomplete. Your church is missing something that was intended for, because the church does not exist for us. We are the church, and we exist for the world. And so, I was looking back, and some of you are probably way more familiar with church history than I am, but it wasn't until like the 4th century that they started actually having buildings for the Christian church. You realize it's because of something like 313, Constantine legalized Christianity. Before then, they couldn't even meet publicly, so there was no way they had a building. So when we say we're going to church, yeah, we understand what you mean. We're going to the building where church meets. But the church was never meant to be a building. It was meant to be you. It was meant to be me. When like-minded people gather together, not to maintain ourselves, but to do the work that God's called us to do. To finish the mission that He has started. The plan that God started in the very beginning. We look in Genesis 3 and see God at that moment realizing, okay, you messed up. Let's fix this. Until that restored kingdom, we've got a job. And it's not about us. It's about the world. And so, as I was thinking about our place and how do we get active and how do we get involved, you guys know this stuff. We'll turn over to Romans. Chapter 12, we get a list of some of the gifts that we've been given. Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 6. We have different gifts according to the grace God has given us. See, we're not all the same. We're different. We've got different gifts. Each one of you has something special and different to bring to the table. You may have similar gifts, but you are unique. You are special and you are important, valuable, needed. We have different gifts according to the grace that God has given each of us. If your gift is prophecy, then prophecy in accordance with your faith. Then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. This is something I struggled with for a long time because they have those tests that try to tell you what your gifts are. I hate tests. Joe can tell you, I didn't do very good at them. So I don't do very good at the gifts test. How many of you guys have ever taken one of those spiritual gift tests? How many ever lied on it because you wanted it to show something up?
All right.
Are you good at speaking? Yes. We sometimes, I mean, it struggle even on those tests to be accurate. But I found, how many of you have ever heard of the apple pie illustration when it comes to your gifting? How many of you have ever heard that? Oh, good. I was assuming someone was going to hear that. All right, let's take for instance, I have an apple pie. You don't. Haha. David may have something in the back. But I am getting ready to sit down and eat an apple pie. Let's imagine there's a table here, and I've got my apple pie, and for some unknown reason, I'm going to decide to put half of the plate off the table, half the plate onto the table. And I'm going to start eating. Well, as I'm sitting here and I'm eating, all of a sudden the apple pie dumps onto my lap. What do you do? You're a hungry college student, yes? No. How do you react? How do you go forward? No, not. This is me. How do you react to me spilling after laughing?
Let me get you a towel. Oh, eat it.
How you respond, I can correspond each of these gifts in Romans chapter 12 to how you respond to this apple pie on my lap. If your first reaction is, let me get a towel, let me help you clean it up, your gift is serving. It's like, it's second nature to you. You know, and some of you are like, I'm not going to do that. That's not your gift.
What did you eat about your
Eating it, that just means you're hungry. It's an illustration. It has its holes, I'm sure. All right, let's say, okay, so your first one, if you try to help, okay, let's say your first instinct is, man, this probably one isn't for you yet in life, maybe later, but if your first instinct is, man, you lost your apple pie, I'm going to buy you a new one. You've got the gift of giving. That's in if your first reaction is, man, I want to replace your apple pie. Your gift is that. If you say to yourself, don't worry, we're going to get this straightened out. You go get the paper towels. You do this. You're the gift of leadership. And you're going to organize the situation. You're going to get it straightened out. And some of you got that. Awesome. Okay, if your first reaction is, that's not how you eat apple pie. See, there's actually a proven model. There's a 7-step, there's a 7-step way that proves this is how you eat apple pie. You're the teacher. You've got the gift of teaching. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm just so sad that you had that happen to you. I mean, I feel your pain. I don't have a glimpse of this one, so it's hard for me to even pretend. But this is kindness. You're empathetic, and you feel sorry, and you're trying to relate, and you're trying to let them know that you're there for them. I laugh at you people. I'm glad you're there because I need it, but it's not me. If you say, if you say, oh man, I've got an apple pie too. I'm really sorry that happened, but I did it just the other day. Watch. I did it too. You got the gift of encouragement. You want to make them feel better about themselves. And then the last one. This one's my favorite. If you say, you're an idiot. Why would you eat your apple pie half off the table? I saw that coming the whole time. You've got the gift of prophecy. It's incredibly simple and it's incredibly funny, but it's one of those true tests that it's like, it's not asking a bunch of questions, it's your first reaction, what do you do? And now when that comes to your church, when you find something you're passionate about and you do it for God, you're not going to get burnt out. It doesn't matter how much of it you do. It's not a matter of how much you've got on your plate. Look at Jesus. Would you say Jesus had a lax schedule? How come he's still able to go? When the disciples are like, here, Jesus, you need to get something to eat. You're missing out. He's not dealing with burnout because he's doing something that he's passionate about, and he's doing it for the right reasons.
Amen.
When you find something that you love and you care about, and you do it with interest, you're not going to say, man, I'm just overworked here. I'm overloaded. I can't stand all this. Then I had to come back and look back to my startup illustration when I came to Bible college. Why do we come here? And I had to reevaluate that. I had to reevaluate my life. I had to reevaluate a lot of things. But God calls you to serve in the local church. He does. Find something you're passionate about and dig in there. Do it. And I see some of you guys doing so much stuff, and so it's awesome. But I also, just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're doing it because you want to. Maybe you're doing it because you feel obligated, you feel guilted, you feel you want the attention. If you're doing it for any other reason than love, you're bound to face burnout. It's bound to happen. And then finally, I want to close at this point. We're called to serve in the church, but we're also called to serve as the church. See, when we come to this place and we work, and the gathering together is important, it really is. But when you leave this place, when you leave the Bible college, when you go to work, you are a representation of the church. You are the church. And so everyone that sees you sees the church. What do they see? Familiar with Matthew 14, you guys know it. You are the light of the world. You are the church. People are to see you and know from the beginning. There's something different about that guy. And they say that about me too, but it's not always for the right reasons. There's something different about him. There's something different about her. I know. And what's awesome about this is it doesn't have to be somebody like-minded. It doesn't have to be somebody similar, same gender, same race. That's what Jesus starts off with the woman at the well. He starts off with the woman at the well going in an uncomfortable position where everybody thought that it was weird, everybody thought that it was wrong, and he didn't care because he loved. He was on a mission, and there wasn't going to be something that was going to get in his way. And so, his love crossed over discomfort. His love crossed over awkwardness. He was a representation of his Father. His Father loved that woman, even though other people didn't. From the beginning of that conversation, immediately that woman knew something's different about this guy. And so the same thing when we go to other people and we talk to them. And maybe we're just talking about food and drink. But they should know something's different about this person. This one loves me, not because I deserve it, not because I could ever earn it. That's just what they are. He knows my mistakes and he still loves me. He sees my flaws and he still loves me. There's certain things that we don't have to teach humans. We like to think that we're good people, but naturally we're not. Naturally, we don't work that way. I was thinking, when we focus on everything being about us, how many of you ever had to sit down with a 2-year-old and say, today, we're going to talk about selfishness. What we're going to do is, I'm going to give you this toy, it's your toy, and I'm going to take it from you, so I want you, once I take it for you, to immediately, scream!
They do that.
How many of you had to have the conversation? And after you're done screaming, I want you to say at the top of your lungs, mine! How many of you guys ever had to train a 2-year-old to do that?
No, it just happens.
You made your kid selfish? No, we don't naturally do that. That's stuff that comes automatically. But we've got to train ourselves to be different. We've got to work at being different. People are to know us by our love. Not because we're like-minded, not because we think the same, not because our doctrine's the same, not because we're the same race, the same color, the same pick gender, pick differences, anything that divides. Relevant. Love conquers all of it. The mission that we've been called, the mission that God has started, the mission that God will complete, is far greater than anything else. So, you've got a living water. You've got a special food. And you're called to serve and use your gifts. But you're also called to be the church of the world. Go out and work and do it for the right reason so that later on in life you're not stuck up and saying, man, I'm so tired of church. Church isn't, I don't like the music, or the preacher won't shut up half the time. Or this is that, and it's just, well, church isn't about you. It's a place where we come and we gather, and what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. What are you doing? But then further, when you leave the church, what are you doing? So you're called to serve in the church. You're called to serve as the church. Find what you're passionate about and go after it. Serve God with your heart. And serve Him out of love. Not out of obligation or fear or all the other things that you can possibly come up with. Serve Him because you love Him. When you find something that you're passionate about and that you love, no matter how much you do it, you'll never burn out. Because you're spiritually fed. And you're spiritually given a drink. That's it.